Something that really unlocked EQ for me and allowed me to start getting fuller, warmer mixes while still having that clarity and separation that we're all looking for in our mixes was understanding the difference between fundamentals and harmonics. It's very simple, but understanding that and utilizing that while you're mixing can make EQ feel a lot easier, a lot simpler, a lot clearer, and allow you to start getting that clarity and separation while still having the fullness in your mixes. Let's go and jump into Logic and take a look at this, and I'll explain it for you, break it down for you a little bit. Now, before we get into it, this is a very specific video about EQ only, which is only a piece of the mixing process. If you're struggling to get mixes that you're happy with, be sure to grab my 6-step checklist to a pro mix from link in the description below. It's completely free, and it goes through the entire process, and it's really going to help you out. So be sure to pick it up. Let's go and talk about fundamentals versus harmonics. I'm going to go ahead and play a snare drum here. And a snare drum is great for this because snare drums have a pitch. There's a note correlated to a drum, but it's not going to move around. So it's very clear to see visually. Your fundamental is that note of that drum. It is the bass note, and it is what we're seeing here at the bottom. It's going to be the lowest visual that you have on an analyzer. Now, everything above this is either harmonic content or inharmonic content. Harmonic content will be directly related to the fundamental. It's roughly 2, so your second harmonic is if you had a 200 hertz fundamental, so 200 hertz here, right around here was your fundamental. Your second harmonic is going to be around 400. Your third harmonic is going to be around 600. Your fourth harmonic is going to be around 800. Does that make sense? Okay, so that is your harmonics, but you also have inharmonic content. This is going to be the sound of the stick hitting the head, the sound of the drum resonating, the type of material that the drum is made out of, whether it's wood or metal. All of those things are going to contribute inharmonic content that are going to also be part of that sound. So you have harmonic and inharmonic content, but the thing we're going to focus on today is specifically the fundamental, which is going to be that lowest pitch relative to that second, third, fourth-ish harmonic, and how you can use these two ranges to create both fullness and warmth and clarity and separation inside your mix. So continuing on with the snare drum example, and then we'll go through a few other examples that are a little bit more melodic in a second. If you want more body out of your snare drum, you want to boost around the fundamental. So if you want that big fat snare sound, you want to boost around that fundamental. If you want a thinner snare sound, you want to cut around that fundamental. Right? If you want to just get a little bit of clarity, if it just feels a little bit muddy to you, but you like the fullness of it, then you want to leave that fundamental alone, and you want to start cutting usually just above in that second, third, fourth harmonic range, right? So somewhere around here, start to get a little bit clearer of a drum sound, a snare drum sound. So if I wanted a really thick snare sound, I could boost here and cut here, and now I have a significantly thicker snare drum sound while also maintaining or getting back a little bit extra clarity. If you like the fullness of the snare drum, you just want to get a little bit more clarity, you can just cut just a little bit right around these second, third, fourth harmonics, right? Okay, so that's snare drum. Let's talk about this with kick drum, because it's an interesting difference with kick drum because low end sources, the fundamental is going to be visually bigger here. So it's a little bit less obvious, but you can see the fundamental on this kick drum is around 55, 60 hertz. That's pretty standard. And then my second harmonic is somewhere around 110, 120-ish, right? So one of the biggest problems that I run into with kick drums is having too much of this like 120-ish hertz, somewhere around there. That's like a little boomier, a little boxier. If you want a tighter kick drum sound, a lot of times cutting a little bit of that, it almost tightens up the sound of the kick drum. If we take that cut away, tightens up the kick drum quite a bit, right? So it depends on the sound that you're going for, but you can see how if you want that kick drum to have more clarity while still being full, we're avoiding the harmonic or the fundamental, and we're focusing a little bit more on that second harmonic specifically in this case. Okay, let's look at a couple of more melodic examples. Let's start with a bass guitar here. So this bass guitar is pretty monophonic. It's one note at a time moving. So you'll see it move around, but that is the fundamental. Whatever the lowest bass visual that we have here, that's the fundamental for that specific note. Now, again, one of the biggest problems that I hear with bass guitar specifically is that the second order harmonic tends to be a little bit more exaggerated than the fundamental, and that gives it kind of just this weird feeling. If I actually go back to the original bass here, just the unprocessed DI bass, you'll see here's a fundamental, but what I'm mostly hearing on some of these notes is that area just above the fundamental, that second harmonic. This thing. And to me, there's something about this like nature of that specific sound, especially when there's not as much separation between that and the low end. It's just kind of gross sounding. And so cleaning that up can be really, really helpful. Now, as soon as we start talking about sources that are moving up and down in pitch, so as opposed to a snare drum that's always going to be the same pitch or roughly the same pitch, if you're like me and hit a drum extremely hard, sometimes it will knock out a pitch a little bit. But point being, a bass guitar is moving up and down on notes, right? Then you have to start thinking about it more in ranges, and you also need to be careful and listen in different sections, because sometimes it will work really well in this section, but in this other section it's making it too thin because he's playing higher up and now you're cutting a lot of that fundamental out of that bass guitar. So it's important to listen in different sections when you're working on anything that's not as simple as something like a snare drum. I say as if snare drum is easy to mix. Okay, let's look at one more example. Let's talk about this on vocals, which I'm sure is something a lot of you are thinking about. With vocals, same exact thing. It's monophonic, meaning you're only going to hear one pitch at a time, one note at a time. And you can see here, if I want a thicker vocal sound, it's going to come from down here. If I want a thinner vocal sound, it's going to come from down here. If I'm struggling with the clarity of my vocals, typically speaking, I find that it tends to be in the second, third, sometimes even the fourth harmonic on the vocal, but just cutting a little bit of that down, you still have the fullness, but you also have the clarity and the brightness, and you're just cutting out some of that muddy boxiness that tends to happen in this 300 to 500, 600 hertz range. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. The last note that's really important to understand is that obviously if you're working with polyphonic sources, things that are playing multiple notes at once, like a chord on a guitar, each of those notes is going to have its own fundamental. So it's going to be a little less clear, and there's going to be a lot more information going on that analyzer, but the same principles still apply. If you want a full sound, closer to the end of where that source is generating the sound is where you're going to find it. And then just above that is typically where you're going to find your muddiness and your boxiness and things that are going to make it sound less clear. Okay, hopefully this is helpful. If it was, definitely let me know down in the comments below. If you don't already have it, be sure to grab my 6-step checklist to a pro mix for free from link in the description below. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.
One thing at a time, I can only